to Math with Wong. Today we are looking at number 6 of the November 2024 paper 2. The question was given in terms of a log function. But then it really didn't ask you to solve for anything, but instead it asked find the possible value of r. And a lot of people say, well, what do I do here? Do I set this equal to 0? Well, not really. This you have to understand that for a log function, right? The domain of a log function, so I'm going to use the letter K here. For a log function to work, the domain of the function has to be greater than 0, which means what's inside the bracket here, in order for it to work, must be greater than 0. This is actually a discriminant question. IB loves to ask discriminant on the exam, but it's never an explicit discriminant question. You kind of have to look for it. So in this case, you can see you have a quadratic, and you want this parabola, this quadratic, to be always bigger than 0. If the quadratic is always bigger than 0, what does that mean? Well, that means there is no solution, right? If this quadratic have to be always greater than 0, then it's not going to touch, which means there is no solution, right? That means the discriminant has to be less than 0. Like, it's not touching. There's no number for x which is going to be equal to or less than 0. So the discriminant of this function has to be less than 0. Well, what's the a value? Well, a value is 4. The b value is negative r. And the c value is r minus 1. The discriminant, which is b squared minus 4ac, is going to equal negative r squared minus 4 times r minus 1. And that's going to give you r squared plus, minus 16r plus 16 is less than 0. Now, this is not factorable, so you can use a quadratic formula, but I'm not going to do that, not on a paper 2. I'm going to use my graphing calculator and find the two x-intercepts, right? So punch in the graphing calculator. I'm going to use decimals here. And I got those two x-intercepts, right? I want it to be less than 0, so that's between those 2 points. So therefore, the r value, the possible r values are from 1.0736 is less than r, is less than 14.9. So within those numbers of r, that the discriminant is going to be less than 0, which means the graph, the parabola, is not touching the x-axis, meaning everything is going to be positive. So the log function is possible. Right? So this one is it's a tricky question, because it's kind of like people were confused by the log and they were trying to solve for a logarithm. Well, that's actually not what they're asking. Right? This has to be the domain of a log function, which leads to a discriminant question. All right. Thank you for watching.